HQN Books and Harper Audio present Christmas in Rose Bend, featuring the bonus story, A Kiss to Remember, by Naima Simone, performed by Mari. Chapter 1. Nessa Hunt didn't do Christmas. As an ER nurse, she'd seen the worst humanity had to offer during the holiday season. Electrocution injuries from plugging one too many Christmas lights into a single outlet, shoppers with broken noses and blackened eyes from Black Friday fights that erupted over the newest must-have toy, dads with busted backs from attempting to mount inflatable Frosties and reindeer-drawn sleighs on porch roofs. And then there'd been that one memorable sex toy mishap. Santa had boldly gone where no Santa had gone before. So no, she was not a fan of Christmas, which meant the town of Rose Bend, Massachusetts, was her own personal version of hell. "It looks like Santa Claus just threw up all over this place," her sister Ivy whispered from the passenger seat. Now there was a nice visual. But slowing to a halt at a stoplight, Nessa had to admit the 12-year-old had a point. Who knew that 3 hours north of Boston and tucked in the southern Berkshires existed a town straight out of a Thomas Kincaid painting? It seemed almost unreal. If any place had that everybody knows your name vibe, it was Rose Bend. Brick buildings housing drugstores, boutiques, a candy store, an ice cream parlor, and diners lined the road. The long white steeple of a church towered in the distance. A colonial-style building stood in the center of town, the words Town Hall emblazoned above 4 columns. And everything was decorated with lights, garland, poinsettias, candy canes, and big red bows. Even the stoplights sported huge wreaths decked out with miniature toys and elves, and the biggest pine cones she'd ever seen in her life. Mom would have lost her mind over all this. The thought snuck out of the steel door in her mind, where she'd locked away all wayward, crippling memories of Evelyn Reed. A blazing pain stabbed Nessa in the chest, and she sucked in a breath. Briefly, she closed her eyes, blocking out the winter wonderland beyond her windshield. It had been 8 long, lonely, bitter months since she'd lost her mother to uterine cancer, since she'd last heard her mother's pragmatic but affectionate voice that still held a faint southern accent, even though she'd lived in Boston for over 30 years, since she'd inhaled her mother's comforting roses and fresh laundry scent, since her mother had rasped a devastating secret in a whisper thick with regret, edged with pain, and slurred from morphine. Maybe the well-meaning friends who'd advised Nessa to see a grief counselor could also counsel her on how to stop being so goddamn angry with her mother for lying to Nessa for 28 years. Maybe then Nessa could start to heal. Till then, she had patients to care for. Now she had a sister to raise. And secrets to keep. "Oh, wow!" Ivy squealed, jabbing the window with a finger. "There's a real town square, and over there's the biggest Christmas tree I've ever seen. Can we get out and walk around, please?" Nessa glanced in the direction Ivy pointed, taking in the square, and in the distance a massive tree. The idea of strolling around in the freezing weather to stare at a duckless fir wasn't exactly her idea of fun. But when she'd agreed to make this trip with Ivy, Nessa had told herself to make an effort to connect. This was supposed to be about bonding with the sister she barely knew. Emptiness spread through her, and the greasy slide of guilt and pain flooded into the hole. She glanced at Ivy, Nessa's gaze lingering over the features they shared, but didn't. The high cheekbones that dominated a face Ivy hadn't yet grown into, the thin shoulders that had become even thinner in the last 6 weeks, since her father had died. A scream welled up inside Nessa, scraping her throat raw. Ivy's father, Isaac Hunt, was the man who had raised Nessa until he and her mother divorced when she'd been about Ivy's age, and then he'd been more out of her life than in it. He had named Nessa as his daughter's guardian. He had trusted Nessa to care for Ivy because she was his oldest daughter and Ivy's half-sister. And though she and Isaac hadn't shared a close relationship when he'd been alive,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?